why intelligent women freeze in hard conversations, and why therapy didn't fix it. You've done the therapy, you know your triggers, so why is it that in those super emotional moments, you can't stay regulated or steady? In this video, I'm going to share with you what the high functioning freeze is and why insight does not override activation, the actual neuroscience behind it. The work intimacy split. When she's really confident at work but falls apart in intimacy, what regulation before communication actually means. My name is Mandi Gardner. I'm the author of Rising, A Woman's Journey of Healing Through Rituals, as well as an Ashtanga yoga teacher and a DBT skills coach. The first topic that I want to talk with you about is the high functioning freeze, what it is, and why it happens. This is a trauma-based chronic survival mechanism where women maintain daily obligations like work, family, appearing organized, all while internally experiencing emotional numbness, disconnection, and profound fatigue. Why does this happen? Often it stems from childhood trauma or neglect, where staying small or calm was what you had to do to survive. It was necessary for safety. This creates a learned pattern of suppressing emotions to avoid danger, which persists into adulthood. It's actually the brain's way of protecting you. I know for me that this is definitely something I've struggled with. As a kid, I was not really allowed to express myself emotionally. If I were to cry, I got scolded as a young child. And so I learned very quickly that it wasn't safe to express myself in an emotional way. And so I very much learned how to shut it off on the outside, but on the inside, I was still dysregulating. The next topic I want to share is why insight does not override activation. So, insight is a cognitive process. It's a part of thinking. It's our rational thinking brain, right? It's part of our cognitive process. It's part of our rational thinking mind. But when we're activated or dysregulated or triggered, it's actually a physiological response. This is our automatic nervous system reacting, and it's often rooted in a deep safety mechanism that we learned when we were kids. We can understand our triggers, like we can understand what triggers us, right? But this does not deactivate the brain's automatic threat response. So, if you've had previous experiences that led to symptoms of PTSD or led to trust issues, anxiety, depression, things like that, we can be susceptible to being easily dysregulated or easily triggered depending on the specific situation. And so, even though our rational mind can perhaps think ourselves out of it, our body will literally go into this physiological response. What I think is so important to understand, what really helped me, and I learned this in my discovery and learning of DBT skills or dialectical behavior therapy skills, which I learned because I discovered that my mom has what's called borderline personality disorder. I found that out when I was 39, and I am the oldest of five kids. And that did have some consequences because she was unable to emotionally regulate. A lot of responsibility was put on my shoulders. And so that led to symptoms of complex PTSD and other things, which I share in my book. My book is Rising. And if you're interested, I will leave a link at the end of the video for you. So the biggest thing that was such a light bulb moment for me learning DBT skills was really understanding that when you are dysregulated, when you're triggered, you quite literally cannot access the rational thinking part of your brain. Like it literally turns off. And so, because of that, you can end up, if you try to have conversations when you're dysregulated, you can end up in these like spiraling, like you just like circle back all the time and nothing ever really gets resolved. And sometimes it can really make it worse. And then you feel depleted and exhausted instead of feeling like connected and engaged with this person, right? So understanding that my brain wasn't working, understanding that my rational thinking mind wasn't available to me when I was in that like really upset triggered response. Either emotional dysregulation or mental dysregulation are like the two most common for me. There's 5 total. The 5 primary types are emotional dysregulation. That's where you're crying, you're sobbing, you're super upset. The next one is behavioral. That could be driving recklessly, that could be shopping, that could be hurting, self harm, things like that. Cognitive dysregulation or mental dysregulation, that's one that I really suffer from. It's where you stay calm on the outside, but inside your nervous system is just totally losing it. Interpersonal, so really getting triggered in these interpersonal dynamics and not being able to handle them in a grounded way. And then the last one is self dysregulation. Self dysregulation is like an unstable or fractured sense of identity, often accompanied by chronic feelings of emptiness, purposelessness, and a lack of self worth. So, understanding those types of dysregulation and understanding that your physiology like literally changes, that you cannot access that part of your brain, that was super important for me to understand. And that was a big point of me being successful in the relationship that I'm in today with my husband. So, I'll share with you a story. I had just moved in with Dave, who's my husband now. He was coming home from work and I called him, and it was about 10 minutes after he was off of work. And I called him and there was no answer. And I immediately was dysregulated. I just went into a super cognitive dysregulation where my mind was going crazy, where I just assumed the worst and thought that he was cheating, having an affair, even to the point where I was imagining it in my head. And I was like, getting prepared to write a big long text about how he said he was going to be home and where is he, and just totally freaking out. And this is all comes from previous experiences, right? So as a teenager, my stepdad cheated on my mom. And then my very first serious boyfriend found out later that he cheated on me. And so unfortunately, I just had this belief that men cheat, right? And so when he didn't answer the phone after 10 minutes after he was supposed to be out for work, I freaked out. And anyway, so luckily he called me soon enough, within 10 minutes. And he's like, oh, sorry, babe. I just stopped by my brother's house on my way home from work and we were chatting. And I'm so sorry I didn't answer the phone. And I immediately just was completely embarrassed about how I reacted. Because literally, I was imagining him like in bed with another woman. And that was just this really extreme response. And that was all stemmed from previous experiences of mistrust. Understanding that was so important because when I was dysregulated, for some reason I thought I was supposed to have these really hard conversations when I was feeling really upset because this was the only time I was really able to express myself. Unfortunately, those conversations never ended up being very productive or healthy. Learning this helped me to pause and to take a step back and to practice self-care in a way that I can become more regulated and more clear, gain more clarity in what it is I want to express, what it is that is upsetting to me, and how I'm going to communicate that to the person involved. So now, instead of trying to have that hard conversation, I genuinely will pause and I'll take a break and I'll try not to think about it. And then when I get re regulated, that's when I can readdress the situation. And that's what you should do too. So if you are in the habit of trying to have those hard conversations when you are dysregulated, let me just ask you, how many times has that been very successful? Probably not a lot, right? Maybe take those opportunities to take a step back. And you know what? I'm upset. I'm going to pause and we're going to readdress this when I'm calmed down, when we're both calmed down, right? The next topic I wanted to talk about was The work intimacy split and why she's competent at work, yet fragile in love. Who can relate to that? If you're watching, hopefully you can. I know that I was hypervigilant at work, worked really hard, and I was very successful. I've been a hairstylist since I was 17. I am 45, so we're going on a few years now. I work in the salon still, only 2 or 3 days a week. I love my clientele, but I'm getting a shoulder injury, and I would much prefer to be helping women like you who are dealing with dysregulation and helping you with the things that really helped me. Talk therapy didn't help. No offense to my amazing therapist. She was super sweet and kind. I went to her for over 10 years. But she never really taught me how to be better and how to behave differently and how to be successful in a relationship. What she did do is she listened to me and offered me a book recommendation once in a while, and then I left. And so most of the time, I was so upset, I'd feel re traumatized every time I left my therapy appointment with no real solution. And it didn't help. And with this drive to have a healthy relationship, I really sought out help for emotional dysregulation, which is a big symptom of trauma, of PTSD or complex PTSD. Like I said, I worked at hair salons and I also opened up a studio salon, and so I've owned a salon for the last 15 years, just a small studio. But it's a small business, right? And I love it, and I'm highly successful. I have clients that I've had for over 20 years, and I love them. I'm to this point where we're part of the family, yet I also am a detached third party. And the therapist thing is the real thing, right? People really share with me because I am this third party. And I'm not an active member in their life, right? And so I get all the juice. Because I suffered so much trauma as a kid, I really have been on this self-help journey since I was a young adult, 17. My book shares like the things that were really impactful and like literally moving the needle in helping me to overcome childhood trauma, specifically being raised by a mother who had borderline personality disorder and other things, right? Everyone's got their own story and everyone deals with it in their own way. But I know that emotional dysregulation and mental dysregulation are such big parts of the struggle. And anyway, so what I share is Ashtanga yoga and DBT skills. So why was it? Why was it at work that I totally thrived? And then I was typically always a manager or like an in-salon educator. I was a traveling educator for many years. I did work up to becoming the regional master trainer. So I was teaching the trainers of 13 different states. And so I've definitely been a leader in the hair industry, and it's something I really enjoyed. However, I was failing at relationship. I kept dating not the best guys. They wouldn't necessarily treat me good. Or I also met some nice guys that just weren't the one. But I definitely had one in particular, a very tumultuous relationship, which I do share about in my book. But I was high functioning at work, but I was failing in relationship. I was with this guy who was really abusive, and we were both kind of raging alcoholics, which just like he drank and I drank to deal with him being a jerk. And that definitely didn't help me handle things better. And that relationship obviously ended. It was not a good one. If it was better for both of us to get out of it, thank goodness. And that was a big learning opportunity for me. It was like, holy shit. I am almost 40. I was 38 at the time, and I just broke up with another dude. Like, I was married and divorced, and then I was with another guy for 4.5 years, and I was hell on earth, unfortunately. But I was so stubborn that like I wanted to make this work. But yet we were still abusing alcohol, and we definitely did not have good skills. But so I was really failing anyway. So I found myself alone. We broke up. It was traumatic, and I found myself at rock bottom. Even though I was successful at work, highly successful. And it was a really big goal of mine to have a healthy, functioning relationship. I want to show my son an example of what real love, compassion, and tolerance, and patience, and responsibility look like. It's very important to me. And so I've just continued to search. Can any of you relate to that? Like where you're badass at work but at home, like in the relationship, you melt down and freak out, or maybe your expectations are too high, or maybe who knows? Like why does that happen? Professional success, it's controllable. Like you can really control your work environment. You can really control those relationships, right? And you get you get validation through your performance, through your sales, or whatever it is your performance marker is, right? But with relationships, it's different, right? Like, you can't really be super vulnerable at work to be successful, but in relationships, you do. You got to be pretty vulnerable. You got to be willing to open up, honestly, your needs, wants, and desires. You got to be able to open up and communicate about how their behaviors are making you feel. If they're behaving in a way that it feels unkind, right? So in a romantic relationship, there is a lot more vulnerability, and you have to be in order to be successful in a romantic relationship, you have to be willing to surrender, to just give up a little bit, meaning like give up on the outcome and try to focus on having emotional resonance with the person, trying to really actively listen and really trying to understand like what it is that they're either feeling or saying, or also you sharing with them how you feel about certain things. It creates a lot of vulnerability, and it's super freaking scary, especially if we have never been given the tools, right? Not only did my family not talk about emotions, but literally we got in trouble. Right? Like we got scolded, me and my brothers. And the two of them were in the military, which they fit perfectly fine because I don't have to be emotional in the military, right? So the difference between my failed relationship, super unhealthy, and then between my relationship now, which is healthy and happy, sexy and fun and respectable, and like we respect one another, and it's the best relationship I've ever been in. And why have I been able to get here? Gosh, it hasn't been easy. I'll be super honest. I've had to sit in discomfort. I've had to sit in situations where he was triggered and I had to just listen. He's had to sit in situations where I was triggered, and those can end up in fights and contention, and that can be really difficult. And a lot of people will take the easy road where they just choose not to talk about it, so that way they don't have to have any contention, right? But then what happens? You start to develop resentment for your partner. And do you really want to be in a relationship where you resent your partner? And so how do you develop a relationship where there's no resentment? You got to get real vulnerable. You got to get real honest. You got to get really good at communicating. All right, next. What regulation before communication actually means. So I have touched on this a little bit about the 5 types of dysregulation. Now, it's super important to not engage in these challenging conversations when either you or the person you're speaking to is dysregulated. If someone is upset, like physically upset, like either crying, sad, pissed, unhappy, angry, like any of these emotions, this is not an environment for a healthy, positive conversation. Right? So if we want to have nonviolent communication where we can communicate ourselves effectively, we need to be regulated. So that way we don't say things that are unkind, say things that are harsh or judgmental or critical, right? Because when we are dysregulated or triggered or mad or angry, we can say things that we don't mean. And it can absolutely turn into the dissolving of the relationship, right? And so if the big picture is that you want a healthy, happy relationship, then really understanding that both parties have to be regulated in engaging in these conversations is huge. And it will literally be the hardest thing you learn, but the most important thing. And it's having so much self-control. And also, you're going to mess up. I still mess up all the time. I'm human, but not as much as I used to. And that's why I'm here to share my message, because it really can get better. You really can learn skills that can help you to be successful. And so pausing when you're upset and taking a step back and maybe having an opportunity to journal and get really clear about what it is that you're feeling or that you want to express to the person. Another important aspect is actively listening. So part of communication is active listening, and active listening is definitely taught in DBT, or dialectical behavior therapy. Now, active listening is something that I will say can be very difficult for me. I have never been diagnosed, but I have always considered myself a little bit ADD, right? A little ADD brain, which having CPTSD symptoms, it's very likely that that's a thing, right? So my ability to listen in conversation can be crap, to be honest. And I have really learned with my husband, Dave, how to actively listen. But what does that mean, right? Let me ask you this. If you're talking to your partner, like your boyfriend, your friend, your husband, whoever it is, right? Your mom, your dad, and they're talking to you, right? And they're sharing something with you. And the whole time they're sharing something with you, you're actually thinking about what you're going to say next, right? Does that ever happen to you? All the time. And so then, that active listening is where we really try to avoid thinking about our response, try to avoid thinking about what we're going to say, and to genuinely just listen. And I will tell you, it can be difficult, and I have developed a technique that helps me, because sometimes I don't want to forget what I want to say, and I also want to listen, right? And so a technique that I've learned, I know it seems silly, but it really helps, is I get a piece of paper and a pencil, and I literally will write one or two words. So if something comes to me while he's talking to me, I'll write something down, and then I'll pay attention again. And then those will just be trigger words to help remind me of, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to say in response. And that really helps, because when you are not listening, or you're interrupting, or you're saying things without really listening, the other person can feel disrespected or disregarded, right? And so if we're really wanting to be successful in a relationship, actively listening without always coming up with what we're going to say next is super important. The active listening component can refer to if we are upset, if we're triggered or dysregulated, right? And our mind is going crazy. That can be where we're not listening, right? We're not listening to what they're saying, we're ruminating in our brain. That is an opportunity to pause and to take a step back and do some self-care. So if we are able to actively listen to our friend or our partner, it will help to reduce stress and sensory overload, which will effectively process information and help you to interact with others in a more positive and productive way. So I mentioned before that I teach Ashtanga yoga for regulation, and I also have my program that I call the Daily C.A.L.M practice, and I just want to quickly introduce you to both of those. So regulation-based Ashtanga is a traditional yoga method, and I teach the very traditional way of practicing. And the reason I teach this is because it has most genuinely healed my body, my nervous system, healed my ability to so many things, everything, right? Body, mind, spirit. It's been amazing. In practice, I have these moments of clarity where I just know that this is what is helping. And a big part of that is pranayama, breathing exercises. And those breathing exercises is really what helps us to develop or strengthen our vagus nerve. And our vagus nerve is a main player in our fight, flight, or freeze, right? When our vagus nerve is physically weakened, we are more susceptible to dysregulate, to get overly stressed out. If our vagus nerve is strengthened, which we can do through asana, physical postures, and pranayama, which is breathing exercises, if we can physically strengthen that vagus nerve, we quite literally increase our resilience to stressors. And we can handle more stress before losing it and freaking out. It's a real thing. There is a physical component to our emotional world. And when I learned, that was a big deal for me. It really helped to really confirm the fact that this physical movement practice is such a big part of my emotional and mental well-being. So the two biggest things that really helped me in my healing journey, and let me tell you, I did have CPTSD. Because my mom had borderline, we moved around a lot. She got divorced a lot. Anyway, there was a lot of fighting, right? She fought with my dad. She fought with my stepdad. There was a lot of instability, insecurity, never felt safe, right? So unfortunately, I had symptoms of CPTSD, and I just fell victim into being one of those. I just fell victim to addiction at a really early age. I struggled with drug addiction in my early 20s, and then when I became a mom, I got off of drugs, but I was still drinking all the time, pretty much daily. And I definitely did not consider myself an alcoholic. It's so accepted in our society, and it's such a difficult thing because that's what people do, right? Let's go out and have drinks, or even at work. And so it's very culturally acceptable, and so it's a difficult thing. Anyway, I struggled with alcoholism for over 20, and I finally quit in December of 2018. And in February of 2018 is when I dedicated myself 100% to the Ashtanga yoga practice. Before that, for many years, I was hopping back and forth between Ashtanga and Ghosh style yoga. But anyway, they were the two most advanced teachers in Utah that I could find at the time. And so I was hopping between the two of them. And then when I just really resonated with what's called Mysore style or self-led style Ashtanga yoga. And so it's meant to be where you memorize the sequence. And so you can learn to begin to do the practice on your own. And you move with your own pace, with your own breath. And it's a beautiful thing. In my opinion, it is true yoga. And of course, being in a led class is so important because that's how we learn, right? But knowing that you are expected to memorize the sequence is such a good meditation for the brain. It keeps us so present and focused because we're looking at the sheet. And we're okay, what are we learning here? Okay, we got to do the sun salutation first. Okay, and what's next? So it keeps you very busy in the mind. So you're not worried about what you have to do later. You're not thinking about what happened earlier. You're very present. And then once you do memorize it, it becomes this beautiful muscle memory where you really have this beautiful opportunity for a moving meditation. And there's so much value to it because sitting in meditation can be hard, right? And so how do we calm down this crazy monkey mind, or the root trees that they call them in the yoga world? The root trees is the fluctuations of the mind. So how do we calm those? I know that if I have a lot of energy, it can be a lot. If I do a little bit of a workout where I'm sweating and I'm really using up energy to where I'm getting a little bit tired and fatigued, right? Obviously, we don't want to move through exhaustion. We want to have enough energy to move out through the day, right? So we're not trying to give it 1,000% or we're killing ourselves. We're trying to find the balance of steadiness and ease. So when we are healing from anxiety, depression, PTSD, complex PTSD, hypervigilance, any of these things, how do we really heal our minds? This Ashtanga yoga practice is such a beautiful way to do that because it really helps to give us this personal daily practice where we are connecting to our body, we're connecting to our breath, and we're allowing ourselves to sit in meditation. And it really helps us to regulate the nervous system before moving into the day. I'm a big advocate of practicing in the morning. Having your daily calm practice in the morning really helps to help you so that you don't. I know that when it really helps you to move throughout the day in just a really grounded and joyful way. The Daily Calm Practice is my program that I have created that combines the things that were really crucial in moving the needle in me healing from dysregulation like all the time, right? From these symptoms of trauma. So I'll share with you the 4 steps. So the Daily Calm Practice is my proprietary experiential program. So experiential meaning that it comes from my personal experience, right? So I grew up with childhood trauma that later manifested into symptoms of complex PTSD, which are things like chronic anxiety, depression, hypervigilance, trust issues, relationship issues, emotional dysregulation issues, and I would dare say that anyone that's on a conscious healing path would really benefit from this program. So the first component is C, calm, right? So the first letter of calm is C, and C represents to create a daily schedule. C represents to create a daily self-care schedule and set healing intentions. A is address and reduce vulnerabilities to dysregulation. Learn what they don't teach you in talk therapy, which includes Ashtanga yoga, which is a self-led style practice, and then also DBT skills or dialectical behavior therapy skills. And then M is master daily practice for peace and connection. And the ultimate goal is really to help you develop a daily devotional practice to yourself or a sadhana that helps you to regulate your nervous system and to move into the day with deep intention. What trained steadiness looks like in real life. There was one point in time that I was dysregulating, like crying, sobbing, losing my mind every single day for almost 9 months. It was shortly after moving in with my mom. It was right after COVID. I was single and I gave up on dating and I was focused on raising my son. And both me and my mom happened to be in the market to buy a home. And it was 2020 and COVID had happened. In our area, it was about April of 2020. And so we were starting to look, so COVID was this crazy experience for all of us, right? And it really helped me to look at what was important to me, look at my priorities. My biggest priority is my family, is my son and my family. And so in this stage of life, I had decided to ask my mom, like, hey, we're both looking to buy a home. Would you want to live together? It would be amazing to have grandma in the house the last years of raising my son. And I thought it would be good for us to be able to walk the dog and have dinner together. And I had all these fantasies of what it was going to be like. Truth be told, it was the hardest experience of my life when I discovered what borderline personality disorder actually is. I always knew that my mom struggled with mental health issues, depression and anxiety. A part of me thought, like for a long time, we thought she was bipolar, right? But bipolar can have extremes of highs and lows over longer periods of time, so like days and weeks. But with borderline, they have extreme highs and lows within a short period of time, like an hour. And it can be very unsettling because at one moment they're pissed at you and the next moment they're like pretending like nothing's happened. And you're like, what was that? So what happened shortly after moving in with her is that her behaviors really began to upset me. They really felt hurtful. I didn't understand them, right? She treated me like I was a monster. She kind of made me feel like I was some abusive asshole. And I was like literally asking her to come have dinner with me. I was so confused. I was so upset about it. And every time we'd ask her to come join us for dinner and visit, and it was like, no thanks. She just never ever wanted to spend time or to be around me. And I took it really hard. And there were some other things where I'd asked her if I could borrow her car while I needed to sell a car, a better one, and I was going to be without a car for a while. I asked her specifically, hey, this is the situation. I'm going to have to get to work on these days. Is there any way that like you and I could work it out with your car? And she was like, oh yeah, sure, of course. And then when it came right down to it, she's like, how dare you try to take advantage of me? I can't believe you're trying to take advantage of me. So then I have no way to get to work, and my mom's being crazy, right? Anyway, it was rough. It was really rough, and I was dysregulating every day. If it wasn't for my very supportive partner, I don't know, I could have ended up in mental institute. That's how I felt. Anyway, it was rough. And what helped me through was Ashtanga yoga, having that regular repetition every day, having that same sequence and then building on that sequence and having that same rhythmic breath and being able to really just be with myself and be with my body and try to really process everything that I was going through. So with daily dedicated practice, I am a completely different person now, right? Like I had to change my environment and make it safer, right? That was number one. So I had to not live with her anymore. I had to have daily practice of yoga, daily intentional, mindful intention moving throughout the day, not letting myself get too overwhelmed or bombarded with these kind of traumatic flashbacks, but being really intentional with putting goodness in my life. I definitely went from rock bottom and being very unsafe, dysregulating, having trauma, right? To having the most incredible relationship where we're not perfect, we're human, right? But we love each other, we're compassionate toward each other, we tolerate each other's quirks, and we have the skills now. And part of it is me taking care of myself first, being able to have that yoga practice, and then also learning the DBT skills to communicate in an effective way. And then also being in an environment, finding someone that was willing to listen and to work with me when it came to dealing with these triggers or this dysregulation that would come up. So to try to make a long story short, I guess, I'll try to wrap it up, is that I do know that the power of yoga and the power of learning these skills. I do deeply understand what it is to be traumatized and what it is to feel completely at a loss for like, why are we going to even move forward? And I feel for you if you feel that way too. So these things have been so powerful in my life, and they have literally healed my heart, my soul, my body, my mind in such an amazing way. And now I get to share these things with my son and my husband and my students and those who read my book. So there is hope, I promise you. So just to quickly review everything that I've shared, we talked about the high functioning woman that goes into the freeze response when entering into challenging conversations and why that happens. We talked about why insight does not override regulation, right? How if we are dysregulated, we need to take a pause, we need to take a step back, we need to do some self-care, maybe take a bath, maybe read a book, maybe distract ourselves for a little while so that way we can calm our nerves. And then when we have more clarity, we can approach having that difficult conversation in a healthier way, a more positive, effective way. We also talked about the split between work and intimacy and how high-functioning women that succeed at work but struggle in relationship, there is a way to move through it. And there is a way that you can learn new skills to be very successful in relationship. So regulation before communication. means that if you are dysregulated, so emotionally dysregulated, mental, cognitive dysregulation, behavioral, which could be self harm, interpersonal dysregulation, which could be really reactive in relationships, and then also, what was the last one? Self dysregulation, where you just don't have any sense of identity, where you just feel empty and at a loss. If you're experiencing one of these types of dysregulation, that is your key to step back and do some self care. And then when you're regulated, that's when you can really communicate effectively and have active listening, which is so important, which is fundamental to relationship success. Thank you so much for letting me share with you about regulation-based Ashtanga and the daily calm practice. I have created a free guide for you. It's the 3-minute conflict reset. So if you find yourself getting dysregulated in conflict and getting upset and not knowing how to proceed, this is exactly for you. I'll put a link below for you to find it easily. So if you made it this far, I hope that you enjoyed it and I hope that you continue to listen. And please comment and let me know if this resonated with you. I would really super appreciate it. So again, thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.